Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's episode of Rebecca and Rebecca. My name is Rebecca Yager, and my partner in crime from Indiana is the fabulous Rebecca Reed. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm well. How are you, Rebecca?
Doing great. Looking forward to this month's interview. Please welcome our fabulous author, Linda Sammaritan. Linda, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I
Okay,
appreciate it.
good. Before we dig into Reaching into Silence, which we reviewed last month, on the Rebecca and Rebecca podcast and YouTube channel. Let's hear more about you. So, Rebecca, do the honors. Tell us about Linda.
Okay, well, Linda Sammaritan writes realistic fiction, mostly for kids ages 10 to 14. She always figured she'd reach teens and tweens for 65 years, or she'd teach them. Sorry, not reach them. I mean, reaching and teaching, very similar. Anyway, I should learn to read. At which point, school authorities would present her with a retirement wheelchair and roll her out the door. However, God changed those plans when he gave her a growing passion for writing fiction. In May of 2016, she blew goodbye kisses to her students and dedicated her work hours to becoming an author. She's a wife, mother of 3, and grandmother to 8, and she regales the youngest grandchildren with Nona stories, which are tales of her childhood. Maybe one day those stories will be in picture books.
Oh, I love that. Love your history. I feel a little out of my depth between two teachers here.
Oh.
Today's interview. I'm only a student. Ooh.
Okay.
All right, Linda, what I liked is that you and I have something in common, and is that we're both Air Force brats, not just military
Oh,
brats, but
okay.
Air Force brats.
Yeah.
So you moved around more than I did, it sounds like.
There was a lot of moves the first 13 years of my life. Yeah.
Wow. Because we moved like every 3 years, and it sounded like you moved almost yearly or every couple of years.
Twice a year
Oh
for a long
gosh,
time. Mm-hmm.
gosh, that's yeah, it's a lot, but I don't know, it shapes you. I think the
It
military
does.
life shapes you. I was a very shy kid myself, and you have to
Oh,
learn.
and I was. It didn't help that I had to make friends all the time. There was always the next semester time to make another friend.
Gosh, it's
So
it's
yes, I was shy about that.
well, I can totally relate to that and stuff. So let's talk about your process of writing a book. About how long does it take you to write a book?
Well, that depends on what you're talking about in writing a book, because I started writing the ideas for Reaching into Silence when I was in my early 30s. I
Hmm.
am now in my late 60s.
You
So
look fabulous, by the way.
thanks. But I wanted to at least remember things from my childhood while I still had that memory. And over the years, when we talk remember whens with family, then I would add to those notes. I really started writing Reaching into Silence about 2015. And I was learning how to seriously be a novelist at that point. So what I thought would be just fun, I had started with NaNoWriMo and writing fiction and thought, well, this is just so much fun. I'm going to have a book written in 30 days and we'll polish it up and off it'll go. No, that's not the way it works. So I began to learn different things about the writing craft. And I saw that while I had a good bare bones ability, I needed a lot of finesse. So it has taken all this time, 8 years, to take Reaching into Silence from 1 book to 3, because my critique groups would tell me, you're not going deep enough. You're not telling us enough about your characters. And I said, well, if I do that, the book is going to be like 600 pages, and this is supposed to be for kids. And they said, then make it more than 1 book. And it was like, ding. Oh, and it split itself into 3 separate books so easily. And then I just started working on 3 books, just split it up into 3 sections and worked on all 3 of them over time. So I would say it took me about 2 years per book. Now I think, having learned what I've learned, any book that I write now will probably take about 6 months to get a good first draft. and then polish it and see where I can go for shopping it around.
Right. So it sounds like advice for authors is part critique group, part maybe attending conferences. I have seen your
Definitely.
conferences.
You cannot do it on your own knowledge. It is the very, very rare person who has so much natural talent. They can write a book with no instruction, and somebody says, "Oh, I love it. I'm buying it. We'll publish it for you." There's always something that you're missing.
Do you have a favorite writing craft book that you've used?
Emotional craft of fiction. That got me into going deeper, because that was my hard part of writing. I can do dialogue that comes so natural. I just have an ear for it. I can do sensory detail now, although that was the first lesson I learned. I would do the typical new novelist. I have all these characters talking to each other, and the critique group would say they're suspended in midair. Where are they? Give us some details, what surrounds them. So I learned how to do that. But getting into the nitty-gritty of my characters, I'm still learning about that, but I'm getting better.
Well, it takes practice. Emotional Craft of Fiction is by Donald Moss, by the way,
Yes.
Maass, for those who are watching and might be interested.
I was going to make a note on NaNoWriMo. She mentioned NaNoWriMo. For those who don't know what that is, there's an organization that you can join. It's free, and you can write a novel in company with other people, so to speak, who you can befriend, and you can keep track of the writing. And there's a bunch of tips, and there's a bunch of kind of information that goes along with that, and they challenge everyone to write 50,000 words, whether that's an entire novel or not, or maybe more than one, depending on what you're writing, in the month of November. And so that's why it's called NaNoWriMo. It's National Novel Writing Month. That's what that stands for. So there's a little, and that's coming up soon. If you're interested in getting involved with that, you can go to the nanowrimo.org and find out about that. There's my commercial for NaNoWriMo.
There's your pitch. Now, NaNoWriMo does help you get the words on the page, but yes, we definitely need to do the editing after it.
Afterwards.
Yes.
You rarely write, the book is not perfect.
It taught me how to write quicker, just to kind of, like you said, just to get the words down. And I had trouble with that at first. So it was a really good lesson for me, personally, learning to write that way. But there's definitely, it's not a polished draft when you're done, that's for sure.
And basically no self-editing allowed during that month that you're writing.
Right.
You can always go back and fix it later.
Yep. But no, it's just getting the words down.
Right.
Linda, you and I probably could be twins here, because I've also not been accused, but been told I don't go deep enough with my characters. So it's comforting, though, as writers, when we all talk, there are similar things that a lot of us go through together. And it is learning the craft, going deeper with the characters, learning dialogue, learning setting, learning editing. I know, Rebecca, you tend to write a lot of words. I'm going to teach you a little bit.
Cut them out.
Yes, I'm learning to cut words. That's my biggest problem. I'm learning, actually, my biggest thing is learning to make sure that each scene has a purpose. And I think that's a big thing for new writers and young writers, is they just want to write all the fun stuff, but each scene must drive the story forward, as the phrase goes, right? And so we have to learn, first of all, what does that mean? What does drive the story forward? What even is that? And then how do you make sure that your scene is doing that? And so, Linda, did you have any trouble with that when you started, or was that more of a natural thing?
That was not natural. I was actually clueless. It was at one of our American Christian fiction writers from Indiana meetings, when I was pretty new at this, that they brought up scenes that you should write scenes. And I'm thinking, there's gotta be 100 or 200 scenes in a book. I'm supposed to write 100 separate scenes? Yeah. Whatever it takes for your story, for the whole novel, they are made in scenes. And once I saw what they meant by a scene, I was like, I can do that. What a great idea. It changed my writing completely because I was no longer thinking chapters, which is a fine way to organize, but I was thinking, okay, this happens in one scene. Now what happens because of that scene? Mm-hmm. So it taught me how to create a chain of events, building to my climax and then resolving. And each one was a scene, was a link in a chain. And it finally made sense to me.
Yeah, you had that whole connective thread running scene by scene.
Mm-hmm.
By scene, yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. The epiphany of scenes. I love that. All right, so let's dig in a little bit to Reaching into Silence, which is somewhat autobiographical. Yes?
It is. I have great fun with people who know me and read it and say, was this part true? Was this part true? And they can't tell what things really happened to me and what things I made up. So
that's
I
fun.
think I did a great job of mixing fiction and nonfiction. If they can't tell the difference, then I feel like I did a really good job at putting together the whole story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well done. Well, as I said earlier, starting out this conversation, is I could relate to the talking about life in a military family, which you did well. And obviously that comes from the experience and it resonated so much in my head. But we're talking the characters of Debbie, your main protagonist, as a preteen or young teenager, and she seems to be the only one who really understands her baby sister, Krista, and the idea of that Krista may be deaf, which
or at least she thinks she's the only one. She may be blaming her mother and father for not listening to her and all that, but that's part of being 12 also.
Yeah. So is Debbie based partly on you, or is there?
Oh yes.
Is she?
Yeah, Debbie and I have most things in common. She's a better version of me, though.
Well, isn't that what we do with most of our characters, right?
Yes, we try.
They're better versions of that. But to talk about, again, life in a military family to me is enough to sustain a story. And then you've got this dynamic with the family, and then with the issues that the baby Krista has as well. And yet you've focused this story for middle grade young adult readers.
Yes.
To impact them, to show them acceptance of, family.
For many, I think that's multi-layers of why I would write for them. But I taught middle school for decades. And if my sister came up as a topic that, oh, you have a sister who was totally deaf. What was it like growing up with someone who can't hear at all? And she had cerebral palsy also, not a bad case, but it affected how she developed. And she had heart surgery done as an infant, and she was blind in one eye. So all these things adding together, that was a lot to live with. When you're a kid, you're not thinking so much about that it's a lot to live with. The parents are feeling it, but a kid doesn't always see that. So I'm hoping I showed, especially mom's tension throughout, that she was hanging in there, but in reality, she was a basket case inside. She was being strong for her family, but so worried about this baby. And she needed her older children to be helpful, especially by the second book. And we're gearing in on Reaching into Silence, but there's 2 more books in the series. And the older children are growing up, and the foreshadowing of the Vietnam War and the military family comes to life in book 2. So then mom will have even more stress on her, and she needs those older kids to help out with so much going on with the baby and her special needs.
Yeah. My father went to Vietnam as well. It's totally relating.
Yep.
So, Rebecca,
didn't you live in Virginia as well? Was it Virginia? Or
No,
weren't you? No, not Virginia.
no, I
You did
lived
live
in
in
New
Virginia
York.
though, right? You did live in,
I
okay,
lived in
gotcha.
Yeah,
But the book wasn't Virginia.
the
Sorry.
book was not Virginia.
It was, where was the beach? I forget.
That was on Long Island,
Okay.
Eastern Long Island
New
in the
York. Well, I'm not
Hamptons.
too far from Virginia. It was East Coast. So, hey,
Yes, you were on the East Coast.
I'm on the same ocean.
Yes.
All right.
Linda, you mentioned your the next two books in the series. Tell us the titles of them so people can look for them.
Okay, the second book is Dancing in the Silence, at which point Krista, the baby, is going on 2, and how she is developing at once they have found out what's going on. And then book 3 is Speaking Through the Silence, where the whole idea is to help Krista communicate with language. And at that point, she's 3, 4, because each book takes 1.5 to 2 years to cover.
Yeah. No, that's really great. It's an interesting series. I also, here we go, twins again, Linda. I have deaf cousins, and so I
Okay.
remember going to the family reunions, and we all learned at least the alphabet and sign language so we could say hi to them. But they were great lip readers.
Okay.
But so I can kind of relate to maybe what my aunt and uncle were going through, because they had 3 kids that were deaf and 2 that were
Wow.
hearing.
Wow.
And so there's something that runs in our family and in the
Yeah.
sign language. But it seemed like the family, the other siblings, even the hearing siblings, were very caring, taking the stress off. But yeah, I can't imagine what my aunt,
And I think it probably depends. If there were other deaf people already in the family, then maybe it wasn't as much stress because maybe they had grown up with deaf family members. So it becomes something you're just used to. It's something you deal with.
Well, I don't know. This is the first that I know of my cousins anyway. A bunch of cousins, but no, my favorite little story is my aunt and uncle. We were at a big family reunion and they're across the room from each other, far away, but they're signing
And
to
they
each
can talk.
other. How fabulous. You don't even have to be next to each other.
Exactly. It's like a secret code.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Very, very fun in that sense. But I think, it's helpful for, like you said, the middle grades to read a story like this, for me to have grown up in a sense with it, watching my cousins, and deaf people are people too. I hope that doesn't
Oh,
that
yes.
it's just a different way of communicating, different, it's just a different language.
Well,
Right.
usually the problem with, middle school kids too, they're terrified of things they're not familiar with. And so to have a story that explains, what's going on and how it's not weird, that's their,
Right.
everything is weird to a middle schooler, or odd or strange. And then they don't want to accept that because they don't like anything that's different. So the fact that you're writing this story for them to see that this is not weird or odd or different, it's just something you deal with, and it doesn't make that person less than, or anything like that. And so that's a very important story, important thing for a middle schooler to learn, because a lot of the bullying and the problems that the kids have relationally is because somebody's just a little bit different than them, not exactly the same, doesn't have the same belief or look quite the same or act quite the same. And so anything you can do to bring a middle school kid into a different situation, get them to accept it, I feel like is just setting them on a course later for them to accept the next thing that comes along and the next thing. So in that, it's a great service. And we definitely don't have enough books for middle school kids that are quality books that show these kinds of situations. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I would add that it makes it just as good of a book for adults to read, because many adults are still the same way. If it's different, they just kind of step back. They don't know how to treat a person. They may not bully them the way a middle schooler might, but they don't want to deal with it. They do think it's less than. Deaf people, the deaf community gets very impatient with hearing people who act like they are special needs They don't consider themselves handicapped. They'll just say, learn a little sign language and you'll be fine. And they are rather brusque in telling you that. Because, and I understand their brusqueness, by the time you get to book 3, you realize that the educational establishment at that time did not want parents teaching their children sign language. They would not do it in the schools. They told parents to ignore their child if the child tried to sign to them. There are some heartbreaking anecdotes out there of just a parent doing what the establishment told them, only to find out that their child was trying to say, I love you, mommy, and getting ignored or getting their hand slapped. And that's just the worst thing in the world for a deaf person not to communicate if they don't have language. So my sister started out with that. Those first few years of her life, there was no sign language. And fortunately, the school she ended up in was a Catholic school. And I think the nuns decided this is not helpful to only teach them to read lips. They don't even know language. They don't have vocabulary experience. So they started teaching finger spelling, and then they started adding signs. They always did speech too. It was what was called at that time total communication. Now I think they call it cued speech. I'm not sure. Terminology changes all the time. But my sister did grow up then, after starting around age 9, that she could learn sign language and finger spelling and go to speech class, which she hated, but she had to do that part too.
But yeah, very, very important. So it's Reaching into Silence, Dancing into Silence, and Speaking into Silence are the 3 books.
Well, each one has a different
there's a different
connector. Dancing in the silence.
Silence, sorry.
Speaking through the silence.
So good.
But it's got silence at the end of each one. Yeah.
Again, I think it's an important series for, like you said, even adults to read, as well as their middle grade, and maybe read with their middle grade or younger children.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. In fact, that was one thing I was going to add from your original questions. I'm working on a curriculum guide for teachers. And one of my best friends, who's a teacher at the school I used to teach in, she's going to put it in her 5th grade class. So we're both really excited. She's already ordered the books and she can't wait to get the finished curriculum guide from me. And she's looked at it and said, yeah, I like what you've got here. So I am excited to have her practice with it and offer it to homeschoolers, Christian schools. I'll offer it to public schools also, because it has Christian elements in it. I don't know if they will be interested, but I'll still offer it.
I think that's fabulous. Wonderful. Okay. And besides these middle grade books, you like to write, I'm going to switch topics a little bit, women's fiction. So what are you working on next?
I have started a women's fiction series, which is Split Time. So which has been, there's a challenge and a new learning curve for me. But it seems to be the way the story was coming out. So it's based on 4 women who were college roommates and best friends then, and they've remained excellent friends through the years. So it starts with them at a late 40s. So they've known each other for 30 years. And in each book, one woman will be the featured protagonist, with the others always around to support her. And it will focus on a particular problem that she's having in midlife. So the first one is a missionary widow and all the problems that she had created for herself while they were missionaries. It's going to be a very hard book for some people to read, because this missionary and her husband left the children behind after a while, since they were in Central Africa and they had his brother raise them. But she has this convoluted, often what Christians do to themselves, sense of guilt and shame over something that the Lord would have forgiven her immediately, but she can't let go of it. So the whole character arc is her learning the truth of how you go back to God and accept his forgiveness and forgive yourself.
Yeah, so powerful. Such a great theme. Such a great theme of that, because we're terrible at forgiving ourselves.
We are.
Unless, learning forgiveness. So is this a series that's the Cracked Quartet series?
Yes,
correct?
They were 4 music majors, and they ended up calling themselves the Cracked Quartet because of the problems they were having. When it goes back in time, it'll often go back to their college years where one or the other is annoying each other or having a particular problem that's much easier solved than once they are hitting 50.
Oh, that looks fabulous. We look forward to that. Do you have a release date yet, or are you still
still working? Yeah, because I'm not self-published. So the first book is done, but I had so much to do in publishing the 3 books for Winged Publications. I didn't have time to do what I wanted to in getting a proposal ready. I have an agent who wants to see it, but I haven't found the time to really do a good job for it and everything else I'm doing with World Without Sound series.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming up, with another year's worth of going to a conference, and I may be presenting it again to the same ladies. I've been trying. This is what I'm working on.
Yep. Hey, life of a writer here. This is it's persistence and going back. I've done that before too. Repeated a pitch to
and making it good. Because I thought I'd have time to polish it and get it to her in a couple months, but at the very same time, this publisher said, I want your other books. And I thought, well, I guess that's the priority. It's what I'm writing for. I'd like to be published. So here we go.
Absolutely. Rebecca, do you have any other questions before we wrap up here for Linda?
No, I mean, we have the advantage of knowing each other fairly well. So we've been together in the same ACFW group and have shared quite a few of these things. So I already knew a lot of it, but I think it's so fun to hear, the progress and what's going on and to see that. And I'm so happy that you were able to get the book contract and get these books out, because I know it was very important to you. It was for not for just you, but your mother, correct? You wanted to make
I wanted her to be alive when they got published. So she made it.
Yay. Well, that's good. Linda, do you have a website where people can find you and learn more about the books and when the Crack Quartet series starts coming out? And
that's lindasammaritan.com. Just know that Samaritan is spelled with 2 M's in the middle.
We will add that to our information, but that is SAMMARITAN, lindasammaritan.com. Pretty easy. I like those straightforward websites there. So be on the lookout. Meanwhile, look for pick up the
those books are on sale on Amazon.
Worlds Without Sound.
Yes. Worlds Without Sound, the name just the worlds. Reaching into Silence and the other 2 books after that. Linda, we certainly appreciate your time, appreciate you being here. Reaching into Silence was really wonderful, well done book, and I think it's important, and I'm glad you took the time to write it, especially being so autobiographical too. It's putting your heart out there on the page.
Yeah, it is.
That's good.
Thank you for inviting me. I feel honored that I could be an author interviewed by you guys.
Oh, thank you so much. It's our honor, actually, to be that. Coming up next month, we will be doing our review of Redeeming the Cowboy by Lisa Jordan, and that's how we're ending our 2023. In December, we will be interviewing Lisa, so we're excited to have her there. And then 2024, I can't believe it, already.
I know. 2 years.
So quick. Yes. And we're kicking it off with the fabulous romantic suspense author Colleen Coble. And we're going to be reviewing her brand new book coming out January 2024 called Fragile Designs. And then we'll be interviewing Colleen in February. So we have lots to look forward to. And we're excited. That's it. But for today, we are so glad that Linda was here and pick up Reaching into Silence and the books that follow. It's really wonderful. So until next time, see ya.
Bye.
Goodbye.